sure you this sign-in sheet here with your address and name. You can print as legibly as possible. That's great so that I can read your name out. We'll probably do public comment a little bit different than a normal hearing to make sure we're receiving comment in relation to the sections of the code that we're talking about and can incorporate those comments a little bit more in real time. So if you want to speak, please sign up. I will officially call the meeting to order. 5:31 on July 29th, special meeting of the Delta County Planning Commission. We'll start with a roll call. Just down at the end and go through.
Okay, Todd Queen, District 1.
David Merrick, District 3.
Russ Coover, District 2. Lance Edholm, District 2.
Kate Garlington, District 3.
Wayne Rose, District 2.
Cindy Watson, District 1.
Everett Neal, Delta County Code Compliance.
Oren Stainbrook, Planning Director.
Sean Gardner, Delta County Planning.
All right. So the purpose of the hearing tonight is to go over the draft language that the Planning Commission has been working on for several months, some updates to the land use code. We have a couple amendments that are specific to types of businesses or development that we're starting to, the county has realized that we need some specific regulation around. And then we have a host of relatively small edits to the text of the existing land use code have come up based on experience from the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission as we're reviewing development projects, finding inconsistencies or confusion in the code, or things that need a little bit of updating. I will have the staff go over basically an overview of what we're gonna be looking at tonight. All the red lines were available after public posting on the county's website. So hopefully if you have comment, you've had a chance to kind of read through the language that you want to comment on. And I think we'll probably do a couple rounds of public comment as we address the kind of specific sections of the code. If you have general comment, that is also more than welcome, but comments, that's specific to the area of the code that we're working on is the most helpful for us in this moment. The goal for us as a planning commission is to basically resolve, to have a formal resolution to adopt these edits that we pass on to the Board of County Commissioners, and then they basically go through the same process, and hopefully we sync up on what we want to see. With that, I'll have Sean take it over. He was the planning director when he started kind of initiating these edits and has been working on this project even after Oren took over. So he'll go over these different sections, and when I see fit, I'll kind of open up to public comment and open up to the Planning Commission conversation to approve these different sections.
All right. So as was said, the Planning Commission is considering a resolution to formally recommend to the Board of County Commissioners 3 amendments that we have collectively drafted in public work sessions over the past year and a half. There were 15 different work sessions that we've worked on these amendments on last year and a half. The 3 amendments include a group of text amendments by chapter and section, and then a natural medicine business amendment, and a battery energy storage system facilities amendment. On July 15th, the public notice was published in the High Country Spotlight, and these 3 amendments were provided to the public to view on the county website, along with various ways for the public to provide comment. And we did receive several comments. On July 22nd, the agenda packet for this meeting was posted to the county website and at the courthouse as required, and the packet includes the 3 amendments, copies of the moratoriums on natural medicine business and battery energy storage that need to be repealed when these amendments are adopted, if they're adopted, and a draft administrative resolution for the Planning Commission to vote on and the chair to sign tonight if that gets to that point. Since the posting of the public notice, staff has received public comments on the following subjects: temporary special events, intensive agricultural setback reductions, and site plan review. Up to an hour ago, I had not received any other public comments, but an hour ago received some public comments on the S amendment as well. A copy of these comments received has all been provided for you. Does anybody have a hard time finding them? You see them? Okay. One of them is in a table format. That's the one that pertains to the best suggested text changes. There is an error in one of the red lines in chapter 9, section 4. There were amendments to the text there that we had discussed, and that I was given a rewrite from the county attorney, and it didn't make it into the red lines that we put up there, and I'd like to show those to you right now for your consideration. And while I'm doing that, Everett will pass out, if you don't mind, a red line of the changes, but I think I'll show them to you up here on the screen to everybody in the audience online so that you can see them. You'll probably see them better that way anyway.
Don, did you say that you had provided the feedback on the best portions?
Yeah,
Just right now in this table.
yeah, I just did that an hour ago, so as soon as I can get it to you.
You have no.
Boy, that is not very large, is it? Way to make that bigger.
And there's Justice, aren't you?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Well, he'll keep working on that, but this is really relatively simple. All we're really doing here is on appeals to the Board of Adjustment. We're just deferring and to the state statute, which encompasses basically everything for the Board of Adjustment. Instead of having all of this written out, some of it potentially in conflict with statute, just reduced it to referring to state statute for our procedure for Board of Adjustment appeals. And I'm sorry, the red lines don't look really good. They don't turn out as nice. They turn out like this. And I don't know why they like CRS is all spread out there. So a better way to see it is to see that we're going from this on the left side to this on the right side. That's what's being proposed. It's very simple. Appeals to the Board of Adjustment shall be in accordance with that state statute. And then the timing, the appeals of the Board of Adjustment shall be made within 28 days of the decision being appealed. Very simple. But I'm sorry, that didn't make it into the red lines there of all of the other text changes. So that's for your consideration. Besides that, I mean, I think probably what's most important in this hearing is to hear from the public, right? And to consider some of the written public comments and then the public comments that are here available by people in attendance. And I think it might be most appropriate for me to answer any questions the Planning Commission has with regard to any comments given, however you would like, but I think maybe I could do that after we hear the public comments.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. In general, we, kind of have set a precedent about 3 minutes for public comment. I'm not going to hold everyone to exactly 3 minutes. I do want, this is a big, editing the land use code is a big thing. We want to make sure everyone is heard. I will ask that you try to speak to the text at hand, and stay on topic. But we will, just so you know, I'm not going to hold everyone to that exact 3 minutes if you have something prepared that you really want to read. I think we should start with natural medicine business. It didn't seem like we had a lot of public comment written in about it, and we did spend a good deal of time in work sessions kind of hashing out the language here. Is there anyone on the Planning Commission that had any questions about where we're at with this? Any hopes to change any language during this meeting? Any refreshers that we need? Just a clarification, I think we can all agree that the state's language around natural medicine business is confusing. This pertains specifically to hallucinogenic drugs like mushrooms and a few other things that are now legal in the state of Colorado when done under the guidance of a certified professional and whatnot. And so we are coming up with language that helps kind of create a little container in this county around where that's allowed. So this isn't like if you want to, take tinctures out of your home and things like that. So, and
I think something that maybe would help, I know helped all of us as we were going through this. The state has mandated that all counties allow this. It's not our choice of whether we say yes or no. What we have been given the ability to determine is the time, place, and manner in which these types of businesses are allowed. And so that was all we were able to affect in this land use code. So just something that might help you understand where we're coming from there. So
the state also has very comprehensive regulation of its own in terms of licensure and their own requirements. So we tried to defer to state regulation as much as possible when we felt like that was comprehensive and work on really what pertained to our county. Is there anyone in the public that wanted to speak on this language in particular?
I saw you had a chart up there in the table 2. Could you just address that, what the C means for everybody so they understand?
Sure, yeah. So this update to table 2B, which is kind of our master table, what's allowed where with what sort of review, would put natural medicine business healing centers, essentially the location you would go to partake in this with the certified professional. If a business wanted to create one of these healing centers, they would be able to do it in all zones except for residential 1 with a conditional use permit. So that would mean they would come to the county with their business plan, with their certifications from the state, and the county could condition after a public hearing specifics about that. So it's kind of like the top level review. It involves coming to the county, coming to a public hearing, and getting a permit from the Board of County Commissioners. So that would both the healing centers and the cultivation, manufacturing, or testing facilities would be allowed after following that process and receiving a conditional use permit in all zoning districts except for residential 1. In residential 1 zoning district, it would not be permitted at all.
Okay, does conditional require a notification to neighbors?
Yes.
I just
Yes.
want to make sure everybody understands what are the conditions of conditional use. Okay, thanks.
All right. I mean, that doesn't seem like there's any major comments on this. No one in the planning commission has any updates. We'll kind of consider that, approved by us, to be included in our resolution at the end. Let's do battery energy storage systems. We didn't have a lot of public comment except for this table of edits that was sent to Sean just prior to the meeting. Again, this battery energy storage systems, we're really focusing on utility scale uses. Large businesses that are creating a large battery storage system, likely to go with a solar array or something like that, that's going to tie into utilities. We also have some regulation around commercial battery energy storage systems and residential systems. But really where the majority of this regulation comes into play is in those large utility scale systems. Is there any comment from the planning commission aside from the language that was just added? Well, we have not added it yet.
Suggested.
Proposed.
Proposed.
Yeah. I think maybe let's go through this written comment, proposed language. I assume this came from some sort of industry professional. And maybe after considering those things, we could open it up to the public if you want to comment on that or anything else in this section of the code. Do you have anything to add about this proposed language or kind of how it compares?
I haven't had any
Yeah.
time to really review it. Mostly had to do with water supply. There was just a lot of care about how it's worded so as to not require water for the facility if the battery technology is being used. Doesn't require that. They seem to understand that we wanted water on site to suppress fire in the case that fire around the environment, threatens the facility.
And
Or if the fire from ignited batteries spreads outside the perimeter of the facility,
can we pull that up on the screen?
which,
The proposed language.
okay, I
You
can,
can-
just give me a second.
I can start us out. So,
Here it is. Super big. Going up there. I mean, it's a lot to
it's
consider.
a lot to consider.
I don't know what the implications are. I haven't had time to really review it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna try to keep this somewhat succinct, but maybe go line by, section by section, water supply.
If I may, Kate, I mean,
Mhm.
we've exhaustively reviewed this,
Yeah.
right? So we were satisfied with our language coming into this, but this is the opportunity to hear what the public has to give for input on
Right.
sections. This is the only input I have in writing. I don't know if anybody in the audience has some other input. But,
Yeah, I mean, a quick review, like on my part, I feel like our water supply, we did really exhaust that conversation about what fire suppression and what was required. I don't personally know that these edits are necessary.
so again, the first one's on, water supply, but then there's the third one down that
Yeah.
also relates to water supply. And then agency coordination is the second one. So here, we were just helping applicants know that whatever application we get for utility scale best, it's gonna go to these agencies for their review and comments. And we put on here that applicants may expedite this review by providing documentation of coordination with relevant agencies upon submission of their application. I guess that seemed difficult to understand for them. It wasn't clear whether the county, I think that they don't know, who has to go get the review agency comments from these agencies. And it's standard practice with all conditional use permits that we send it out for review agency comments. So it's already taken care of in another part of our code. They just weren't clear. Is it our responsibility or is the county going to be doing that? That's one comment. And then, and so it's up to them if they want to get those comments from those agencies at the time that they submit their application.
Yeah, I guess, so any opinion so far, guys, about that change in language for agency coordination? I think our drafted language,
We could take up.
Spent quite a bit of time on it.
Yeah. yeah,
Trying to go through all this again.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean-
Stage,
I guess,
Roll forward to the
Yeah.
BMCC and they can consider it too.
I guess as I'm reading it, I don't see much use in rehashing all these. I was feeling pretty good about where we were at. The only one that I guess I haven't had time to fully consider is their last section on warranties, decommissioning, blah, blah, blah. They suggest just taking the language from the solar section of our current land use code. Which that does seem like a fairly straightforward thing to me, and would provide consistency across the land use code, but I also am not super familiar with how it was written before and how much we iterated on that section.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I understand the water usage here and protection of the environment and wildlife and all that. I mean, I'm sure, so stop me if this is in the state regs, but the problem with these batteries is the water, if the lithium batteries pop, water doesn't do you any good. In fact, it makes it much worse. So
Yeah.
Is there fire suppression as part of the design of this facility? I understand if it catches on the grassland that you want water to deal with that. I think the more or equally problematic part is just the instability of the batteries, and if there's fire suppression of some type to put it out.
Yeah, so that is definitely something that we have heard from industry professionals. We have considered a lot, and it seems like this commenter that's what they're kind of trying to get at, is that we don't need water for fire suppression if water isn't recommended for fire suppression in these cases.
Okay for the grass fires, it's not okay for putting out the battery.
Right.
And there is a lot of language about training, emergency response, and basically having the correct fire suppression on hand.
So this is something very specific, not with regard to the fire if the batteries catch on fire. This is something different.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe we've accounted for the
Yeah.
battery technology, if it doesn't require, or actually if it's not supposed to be put out with water.
Yeah.
It don't require water.
Also, if I could just make a point of order, this way we're doing it is very difficult to follow. If we're gonna
Okay.
do public comment, can we please separate it from deliberation with the board?
Yes.
Because I believe it's all important.
I guess
but it's
I'll
hard to be-
ask Gordon.
Yeah, of course.
Is anyone on the board inclined to adopt any of these changes into the language that we have already written?
I think we went over it. and
Okay.
Really the details. I mean,
No.
All right. I guess with that, I will open up public comment. If there's anyone that has public comment for the battery energy storage system, please at least stand and state your name and address so that we have that for the record.
The biggest thing that helps me is if we have enough of a break, if they want to sit up here, name.
Or would you like him to reiterate what he just said, kind of, or not?
Yeah, it's up to you. Like I said, the back and forth in the middle of it was
The
hard for me
questions,
to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for jumping.
That's all right. I want to make this as informative as possible and help, our minutes and our official process. So if anyone has any formal public comment to add for us to consider to consider changing the language that we have in front of us, please let me know. Anyone? Okay. With that, I will mark battery energy storage systems as generally approved by the Planning Commission to include in our resolution at the end. Now get into the meat of it where y'all might have something to say. These are a lot smaller sections. Do you want,
So nobody had a comment on that?
no, Bess?
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
No. Let's pull up the text amendments as a
I'm gonna pull
whole.
that up in here so that we can pull up any one in particular that you want to see.
Mhm. And I think, again, this commission has spent a lot of time on these. We were feeling fairly good about things. Before I open it up to public comment, was there anything that members of the commission felt needed addressing? before comment? Okay. With that, I think, or did you
I
wanna,
just want to reiterate my reminder that I showed you the text amendment to chapter 9, section
Okay.
4.
and maybe just while we're being reminded of that and for the public record, is everyone good with the update that Sean gave us for the Board of Adjustments process? That can be, officially redlined.
Here it is, right here.
It's right there.
Here's the existing on the left,
And
here's
there's
the new on the right.
Great. Yes, that can be incorporated into the text, that hopefully we'll approve. All right. With that, I am going to open it up to public comment. If you know the section of the code that you have comment on, that is super helpful for us to be able to look at that language. If you have specific language change, that's even more helpful for us to consider. I will take some notes on general comments and then allow some time for the planning commission to deliberate whether we want to make any more changes before an official motion. And where did that flip forward?
I think it was right in one of that chair right next, lady.
Did everybody get a chance to sign in who wanted to speak? You can give it to Kim. I'll take it.
Right, we're just gonna start at the top of the list. Corinne Holder. If you can stand and share your address, and if you don't feel like shouting, you can also come to the front if you would like.
13501, 2900 Road, Hotchkiss. So, you want me to specify that?
If you have specific language or the section of the code you're talking about specifically, it is helpful for us to just pull that up and look at what you're talking about.
It seemed like on the old, it was number 11, limitations on modification setback for agricultural uses.
Hold on.
So that's in this section of the code, use specific standards 2.4.
2.4.
Right?
Limitations on modification setbacks for intensive ag.
Okay, so I just wanted to reference, from the article that was in the spotlight, that these proposed amendments, the purpose to change them is to help protect public safety and neighboring properties. That's a purpose that these modifications have been put forth. And so there is in the path, what we've set forward for the limitations on modification setbacks for intensive agriculture. What you're proposing to do is to setbacks to residential uses as defined in subsection 2 of this section on intensive agriculture may be reduced by up to 50%. And so in the past, setbacks were set at 1,000 feet, and then now this could be reduced up to 50%. So that would be down to 500. And setbacks for property line, that's for for residential use. So it seems like what you're saying is that now, if we're gonna have intensive agriculture, it's just approved that a 50% setback from the property line of residential properties is what you're proposing, right? As opposed to in the past, that you would have to go to a conditional permit in order to do that. And now it's like it's okay. And now I don't quite understand why that is protecting our safety and improving it and improving the neighbor's property, which seems like is, I want to say, protect public safety and neighboring properties. So there was some ambiguousness in the last where you could have only 25%, which of course, in the situation that did happen on Redlands Mesa, it would not be permitted with 25% because the way the property is configured in an L shape, you can't come up with that big a setback from residential neighbors. So now it's like it's just all okay. And I don't understand that. I want to understand where your thinking is on that and what the reasoning is that that's going to improve our safety and rights of the property. Thank you.
I think I do want to break and have Sean maybe address where this language change came from, because I think the intent was to actually make it less ambiguous, coming after the contentious application that we kind of realized this was confusing for folks. And without diving into the other language about what setbacks are and what residential uses are, I think it has the potential of reading that we're actually allowing bigger setbacks for residential uses than we are for non-residential uses.
Right, so
Yeah, and I have a feeling there's several people here that might have the same concern. So can we look at this language and kind of what the implications are for it?
Just one thing real quick, the
Yeah.
conditional use review process is still intact. It's right there in point A, right there. Setbacks for intensive agricultural use shall only be modified through a conditional use review process. So this, for the example, the one that everybody's familiar with, the recent Hostetler case, it was a medium animal feeding operation. The setbacks for a medium animal feeding operation, 835, was 1,000 feet. That's a standard, but there's a built-in allowance for a consideration of a reduction by the Board of County Commissioners. The way it can get to the Board of County Commissioners to consider allowing the reduction is through the conditional use permit process. So it's still intact. You still have to go through a conditional use process. We're not changing the standards. We're just clarifying what some ambiguous text in the standards that we heard from many people during that process that they found to be too ambiguous and difficult to interpret. And so the added text that's in the green up there on the screen is simply to clarify what we're referring to for residential uses.
You want to read that?
Yeah, but if you go up here to where the setbacks are for residential uses, they are 1,000 feet here. Sorry, my mouse is just crawling all around. But then from property lines, they're 100 feet. So the potential allowed reduction from residential uses can be up to 50%, which would be down to 500 feet potentially. Doesn't mean it's going to be allowed. Still has to go through the conditional use, still has to be heard by the commissioners, go through the planning commission and all that, just like it did with hostile. It's just that that's potential for it to be reduced to that. And then for property lines, the setbacks are 100 feet down here at the bottom. Those can only be reduced 25%. So that's what that is intended to mean. And that's why this language was added, is to clarify. So it says setbacks to residential uses as defined in subsection 2 of this section on intensive agriculture may be reduced up to 50%. Then it says setbacks to property lines of properties that do not meet the definition of residential use established in this intensive agriculture section may be reduced up to 25%. I don't know if that helps.
So the potential setback, the potential maximum or minimum, I guess I should say, minimum setback from a residential use would be 500 feet if someone is permitted the 50% setback.
From the
Reduction.
property line.
From
Property line.
from the property line. Well, no, 500, yeah, 500 feet from the property line.
That's incorporated in the definition of residential
The-
use.
For a non-residential use, the minimum setback could be 75 feet from the property line.
So what kind of a non-residential, what kind of property would that be?
A property
Hayfield,
that's not tax assessed residential. So it could be a vacant property with no house.
Uh-huh. So, and it could be,
But
residential agriculture?
If there is a residence on the property and the property is tax residential, then the residential,
definition of residential use.
the residential would apply. So the minimum of 500 feet.
Right, so that's worse than it being 25%. I mean, and the residential is, you know, farther away from agriculture than other uses are. You know, that they're already there. I mean, it's not like it's a vacant property and you're saying, okay, well, this is a vacant property that may sometime be a residential property. So then we should only allow a 25% reduction there.
So
I think that the thing I want to make clear is that the intent of this amendment to this text, this little section of text right here, was not to change the standard. The standard, as it was interpreted by the commissioners in the last, occasion we had to use this part of the code, is remaining the same. It's just that we try to add some text to clarify what residential uses was referring to down here in this point, and what property lines was referring to down here in this point, so that it was explicitly clear. But the standard remains the same.
So I think there's a little bit of confusion because 50% is a much bigger reduction than 25%.
Yes.
But if you look at that table of setback requirements, if you fall under the residential use category, that setback is 1,000 feet. So 50% of 1,000 feet is 500 feet. Versus if you're not residential, looking at the table, the setback is 100 feet. So 25% of that,
75.
or 25% reduction would just be 75 feet. So overall, there's a much greater buffer between residential uses and than non-residential uses. But the percentage is different. What I'm hearing is that this text still might be quite confusing for the average person to understand. And I think I'm going to make a note of that for us potentially to look at language that we could fill in here. So I'm going to note that.
So what is the deal with the 1,000-foot setback? I mean, what, is that the rule? It's the rule.
So
That's
again,
that
I
is
think
a rule, but
I think what Sean is trying to say is at the adoption of the current land use code, there was much deliberation by the planning commission and the board of county commissioners about what those setbacks and reductions could be. And our intent is not to change those standards with this edit, but to clarify what residential use means and what standard has to be followed. Again, I'm noting that is maybe still not clear, but I don't think there's much interest on this commission or the board of county commissioners to change that standard altogether, to talk about whether 1,000 feet or 500 feet should be permissible. But we want to make sure that in reading the code, people know where they stand within those standards. That makes sense. I'm gonna keep going with the list of public comment. Like I said, I know that a lot of you probably have kind of questions and comment on this specific issue, and we will deliberate after hearing public comment in order to potentially solve some of this. I'm just gonna go down the list so that I don't get lost.
Okay, I just wanted to make one small point.
Okay, I'm going to go down the list, and did you sign up to talk?
I did, but it's not what I'm going to say. It's just, we're having this discussion. And the one thing that always seems to be ignored is that, residential use has got this definition, but there's other residential uses.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to make your comment during your time to talk. Linda Lax.
Yeah, hi. Sure. Okay, I live at 13074 2930 Lane. And I guess I have my concern is the ability of say this project that's coming in on Redlands to come in under this conditional use and changing the setback rules. It just seems like you're setting a precedent that, as long as you are allowing this to happen under conditional use, then it's possible that anything can come in. And I was at a previous meeting and there was a lot of stipulations made about, well, the project will have to do this, and that. There was like a whole laundry list of things that they would have to do to meet the conditions. But I don't have an understanding of how that's going to be monitored. Like who's going to monitor air quality? Who's going to monitor whether trucks coming up Payne siding go to the go onto the other lane and create a hazard for drivers coming down on the opposite side. Like, who's going to do that? How are you going to assure us that these conditions are met? So that's my comment.
Great, thank you so much. I'm not going to try to answer everyone's questions right now. If there seems like a lot of questions about the same thing, or if there's some clarifying things we want to do towards the end of the public comment process, we'll address those, but I appreciate your comment. David Larker?
Yes, thank you. 38594 Stucker Mesa Road. Yes, I really two comments. One is kind of a general comment, then I have a comment on a specific section. General comment is I want to compliment the Planning Commission that they take a positive view in the writing. And what I mean by that is changing the not, this is not going to be to something is required. I think it's really a smart move. I mean, it's time to, for the commission to, take a deeper look into lots of these issues as opposed to it just falls into the not categories. Let me compliment you on doing that. I'm sure you get a lot of compliments on the land use code, so I'm moving quickly forward. But anyway, I want to talk about section 7.1 very briefly. And this has to do with the site plan review.
What section is this?
I think it says 7.1 on the top of the document. Yeah, so it's the part that's edited here. So I'm very much in favor of the site plan review, although I want to condition that remark on, depends on what the site plan review actually is. I mean, it can be an overwhelming thing as well. So one of the things that somebody's gonna have to deal with is, what does it look like? So somebody wants to put in a house or, add a business or whatever these things are. I think there should be a site plan review, but the issue is, to what extent do you want to see? And so I think that's something, some specificity around that. Maybe that's not this commission or committee here. Maybe it's the planning commission. I think it can be overwhelming for smallish sorts of projects. But what I really want to say is I'm very much in favor of the site plan review. I think it's important to have transparency on what neighbors are doing. And in terms of what's likely to happen, say on our mesa or other mesas. But the other thing is, as part of the site plan review, if it's a residential type of thing, I would like to support the idea that if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to pull permits for electrical, sanitary, and water, and they have to be part of the site plan review. And so I like that. I like the idea, subject to the complexity of it. I don't want, it to be overwhelming. On the other hand, I think there has to be some specificity about what it is, or permits pulled, and what's likely to happen in the various construction that might take place. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. All right, next up, TK.
Yeah, Tom K, 15368 2525 Road. This is a little different form than what I'm used to, so I'm gonna try to shorten everything I had to say down to different things. So specific items, here's some bullet points that I found. The definition of home business. It should include hours of operation, number of days the business can operate, and I suggest a Monday to Friday 8 to 5. It goes beyond that, then I think it should be in the conditional use. What we've seen is 5 years of use of the current land use code and its impact on residential uses. Places of assembly it needs a better definition of, and I'll quote, indoor or outdoor spaces where people gather for civic, cultural, educational, or religious purposes. I don't know what assembly is not civic or cultural, so that essentially is everything. I don't think, again, no hours of operation, no limit on the number of days. Intensive agriculture, to try to this. I'm just curious to know the recommendations. There was a committee, the CAFO working committee worked on this for 6 months and came up with recommendations that had to do specifically to setbacks regarding, because there's a big difference in medium to large agricultural uses, intensive agricultures, in the number of animal units allowed. One goes from 50 to 999. That's a pretty big difference. So we felt that if you're on the upper end, the same setback may not make sense. So those setbacks were tied to the number of animal units. And I think that should be revisited. I think that was a recommendation by 7 people that sat for 6-7 months getting input from all over the state. Section 6 development review bodies, duties and responsibility of the director. It should include the ability to make referrals to agencies. I didn't see specifically, I know it's traditionally what they do, but it doesn't specifically say that the director makes the referrals. And then section 2 roads, access and circulation. I'm asking that the permits for an access permit be issued by the director with the county engineering being an agency that subdivision applications are referred to. Right now it's confusing in code in that you apply to the planning department for a permit to subdivide a ground and you have to go through an access permit, and that's okay, except you don't understand that that access permit is not controlled by the planning department. It's controlled by the county road standards or the county engineer. And those standards that he goes by are not even part of the land use code. So effectively, you've got 2 different bodies administering the same application, and I don't think it's right. I think that the engineers has the recommendations. They know it's good for the county, et cetera, whether it's county road. They should be a referral agency, and ultimately it should come down to the planning department, or the director in this case, to make that determination. A lot of my other comments were basically more philosophical in manner in how you guys approach this whole thing. There needs to be a sort of a basis of what you're philosophical approaches to a land use code. And I don't know that I necessarily saw, I think here I see there are basically two types. One is in which I think the current land use code is, we basically try to approve everything. And it doesn't matter really what it is. The other one is doing a little more protecting of the residential neighborhoods than what's being done. And I think the last 5 years, we've seen that. And I think it goes beyond just the residential neighborhoods, because we're allowing commercial uses, really is what I call it. People have been calling them gathering places, or they're calling them special events, or they're calling them, businesses, home businesses, but they're not really home businesses when they're working 7 days a week with no hours of operation restrictions and things like that. If they're gonna go into a residence, they need to sort of tie in with the rhythm of the residence. People go to work from 9 to 5. They don't want to come home and say, oh, my neighbor's got a business that's starting to work from 5 till 5 in the morning. That just doesn't work. And I think there needs to be more consideration of that, because it doesn't leave a neighbor or an individual many options to deal with. The only other really way to deal with it is to buy the land and control it. That's what we always say. If you don't like it, you should own it. But then you're sort of starting your own private land use code. You're establishing rules and regulations, or what we call covenants, of what you can do. And I own some ground next to me. I know my neighbors, they didn't even like that I was building a house. They wouldn't want me to sell that ground. Somebody could put 50 people in there 7 days a week. That would just make them really bad. So I'm ended up I'll have to create covenants, or like what I'm calling a private land use code, that basically says, I don't care what the Delta County land use code is, you don't have the right to it. And I don't even know if it's legal, but it's a covenant, and I don't think you guys can override covenants. I just think it's the wrong approach. Private land use code shouldn't be required to fix what I think the Delta County land use code can do. The other thing I think is last is I think our land use code has shown that we're getting a lot of our commercial uses out in the county. And I think the detriment to our downtown our municipality, Hotchkiss, Crawford, they all have too many empty spaces, because people can go, they can do food, they can do liquor. They just did 2 new liquor licenses, and they're not downtown. People are going outside of the downtown, and I think it's killing our downtown. I call it, the land use code. And I sat in your seat for 6 years, and I totally understand it. When we started the land use code, I still think it's a good thing. I think we need it. But after 5 years, we need to evaluate what are the impacts that it's had, and they're visible. All the downtowns. That's not a fight I'm going to pick up. I know the mayors of a lot of the towns are going to bring it up to the county commissioners, to you guys, and they should, because I think our land use code is impacting them when we're allowing all these commercial uses within it. When there's just, how many wedding venues do we have right now? And I'm not saying they shouldn't be out in the county, but they're serving food, they're serving liquor, they're up late at night. I'm not sure that it's the right fit. If your business can go downtown, or it doesn't need to be in the neighborhood that can be from 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, then you should be looking for some other place. So I guess the answer is, I feel like my request is to defer your certification. That's what you're doing tonight, is certifying the land use code through your resolution, which is required by state statute that you do from the Board of County Commissioners. But I think what we've seen here tonight with some of the comments is that there needs to be more conversations and more thinking about it. And I'm very respectful of the amount of time you put in. I've been there before, I know what it is. But when you're elected to that seat, I'm sure nobody told you, oh, by the way, you're gonna have to rewrite the land use code. Because, that's just not something you thought about. When I got elected, or appointed, they never told me, by the way, you're gonna have to draft land use code. And just because we sit there doesn't make us experts. The only way we'll know, including the battery storage things, is when we implement it, when we start to use it and see what the problems are. Just like, the agricultural use, Sean is right. There's confusion, but clearly there's still confusion. I think the CAFO Working Committee tried to resolve that. So I just say land use codes, they need to evolve, and that's what you're doing with this land use code. But they shouldn't dissolve into something that's not meaningless. But when the really approach is, and it's not necessarily your approach, it's coming from above, is we want to prove everything. And I think that's wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this next name I can't quite read. Maybe CR or ER.
Is it Chuck?
It's Chuck. Chuck. You should know to write your name more legibly.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. K kind of covered most of my stuff, so I put it away. But we had a couple of things, and I've attended a
Do
lot.
your state your address or anything if you would, sir.
5609 2000 Road,
Thank you, sir.
Delta. We went through a bunch of the standards and we talked about setbacks. And the standard was 1,000 feet. And then we mixed in agriculture, egg growing, and we also talked about, and I don't know where it went from there, wetlands. If these, and we'll use Bass as an example. People coming in that want to put in these battery stores, should there be a dilemma that water's going to run off into a potential wetlands area? And there's no rules or regs to cover that. It's just kind of the commissioners are going to work around it and somehow make it work because they feel that they need to do that. I think if we go back to, you know, some of the rules and regs of what we can and can't do, I believe it'll work a lot better. You'll be in a position of authority, not in a position of begging for forgiveness. You know? So that's about all I had to talk about. But it's worth talking about. You know, we had birds, we had geese, we had ducks, and then we had a lot of gunfire, and now we don't have that corridor anymore from the lake back and forth to the mesa. We could go into that, but there's no reason to do it now. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks for your time.
Chad.
Thank you.
Tim Austin.
Pass.
Okay. Harry
Havens?
Haven. Yes, that's me.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of a mess, so this makes sense. Okay, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Excuse me, address
Oh,
right here.
sorry.
You're completely fine. I wanted to wait for you to have a gasp there. Go ahead.
13496 Rimrock Road.
Thank you.
Okay, so these comments address the proposed clarification of the ambiguous language in Chapter 2, Section 4, limitations on modifications. While I think it's worthwhile to clarify the ambiguous language, I think it was clear to everyone that the existing language was unclear. However, the clarification should reflect the code's protective purpose. And I believe the amendment as proposed does not fully achieve that. I submitted written comments on this. First of all, excuse me, the code could use some criteria for evaluating setback modifications. If you're gonna have extreme setbacks, there should be some criteria. I listed those in the document I submitted, so I won't get into those, but Chapter 2, Section 4A establishes detailed standards for intensive agricultural operations, odor, dust, noise, so forth. But Section 4A, which governs setback modifications, provides almost no guidance on how these decisions should be made. Also, the code could use some criteria for evaluating cumulative impacts. Same thing. The current language requires the board to consider cumulative impacts when deciding whether to allow a setback reduction, but it provides no guidance on how to conduct that evaluation. What does a cumulative impact analysis actually look like? What factors matter? Again, my written comments went over some ideas that you might want to look at. Clear guidance would make cumulative impact evaluations more meaningful and defensible. And now I'm going to circle back the most important point here. The proposed amendment would allow residential use setbacks, the setbacks that provide the greatest separation between intensive operations and neighboring homes, to be reduced by 50%. At the same time, it limits reductions for all other property lines to 25%. That is backwards, I believe. The 100-foot setbacks were there for a reason. The setbacks are designed to provide the most protection for residential neighbors, deserve the most protection from reduction, not the least. And they need criteria if you're going to give any sort of reduction. The land use code states that its requirements exist to protect public health, safety, and the environment. A uniform maximum modification of 25% for all setback categories would be more consistent with that stated purpose. It preserves the board's flexibility to grant reductions when warranted while reinforcing
that established setbacks are the standard, and modifications are intended to be limited exceptions, not the starting point for negotiations. For these reasons, I would ask that if this amendment moves forward, the language be revised to apply a uniform 25% reduction, maximum reduction to all setback categories. Thank you.
Thank you.
Naomi Gray?
I'm gonna come up and be comfortable, comfortably seated. Nomi Gray, 29587 Redlands Mesa Road, Hotchkiss. Thank you. And these comments are regarding the Land Use Code 2.4.11A, limitations on modification. The amended language, which allows up to 50% reduction in setback standards for residential uses as defined, provides a greater protection to non-residential uses than it does to residential uses. There is something fundamentally wrong with that approach. Protecting the health, safety, and welfare of people in their own homes should be the priority. The goal of this amendment was to remove ambiguity in the code. While it accomplishes that objective, it goes beyond its stated purpose and creates the unintended consequence of reducing protections for residential properties. Instead, I propose limiting setback reductions for all uses to no more than 25%. This approach would make the code clear, consistent, and straightforward to administer while avoiding the unintended consequence of allowing intensive agricultural uses to locate too close to homes. Residential uses, as defined, are often located on smaller parcels where homes already sit relatively close to property lines. Reducing setbacks by as much as 50% would significantly diminish the protective buffer that setbacks are intended to provide for neighboring homes. Furthermore, in most jurisdictions, modifications of this magnitude, more than 25%, would require a variance. Variances are evaluated using clear approval criteria. Setback modifications are not. Without clear standards to guide these decisions, the outcome can become arbitrary and inconsistent. In closing, although I would prefer that no reductions to required setbacks be allowed, I recognize there are circumstances where a limited modification may be appropriate. For that reason, I encourage you to recommend a maximum setback reduction of 25%. That change provides flexibility where it is warranted without diminishing protections for residential uses. I've attached proposed amended code language to the letter I submitted that makes this revision in a simple and straightforward manner. This is a balanced solution that not only clarifies the code, but does the right thing by preserving appropriate protections for residential uses. I respectfully ask that you give this proposal your serious consideration. And I brought my letter because I didn't find it online with packet documents. So I've got a copy for everyone.
We have it in front of
Okay.
us. If your comment is submitted after it's been posted, it won't update public comment to the site, but we do receive a copy by email of all public
Okay.
comment.
Okay. And what I just, briefly, what I was going to say when I raised my hand is that one of the things that hasn't been addressed by any of this, and of course it's for another day, is that residential uses do not just occur on those properties that are in the definition. I'll use myself as an example. I live on 100 acres. I have a residential use. It is 125 feet from my property line. I would only be subject to a 25% diminution of the 100 feet that is required to an ag property because I am 835. And so conceivably, you're looking confused. Conceivably,
I mean,
they could be,
your property has a house on it,
my property has a house on it.
so it's tax assessed residential.
It isn't tax assessed
Okay.
residential.
Got you.
That's what I'm saying is this is one of the things that hasn't been considered is those people that are on 835 properties. The homes are typically considered agricultural residences, okay, because they're on a farm. So the 100-foot setback applies to those residences. Of course, the setback reduction could only be 25. But for me, at 125 feet from my property line, I could be within 200 feet of such a use. And I think that at some point, further consideration has to be given to other residential uses that don't meet the definition of residential use that we're working with in this particular code section.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noe. Travis?
I'll take these and pass them to the right. If you would pass these to the left. I didn't want to get any comments in a long time. I'll just sit here if that's okay. I want to reiterate what Nomi just said.
Yeah, Travis, can you just state your address for the record, please?
28612 Redlands Mesa Road. If you're an 835 property and have your residence on it, you are generally, your residence generally runs with the land. You're not tax assessed as a rural residential property. And most of these 835 properties that have a residence on them put their residence very close to the property line because they don't want to be working around the house out in the middle of their field. Again, the setback to that residence does not meet the requirement, the definition of a rural residence. So the setback to the property line is 100 feet. And I know many people that live within, they have their residence within 40 feet of their property line. And you're setting agricultural folks up to be screwed by what's in the intensive ag property line figures. So that's something that you should take a look at in the future. Now on my comments, I concur with Nomi Gray's comments. However, I would add one additional sentence to her input to make it read. And essentially she says 11 is limitation on modifications. A, setbacks for intensive agricultural uses shall only be modified through a conditional use review process described in Chapter 8 in accordance with the following limitations. She doesn't have one by hers, but I put 1 parentheses. Setbacks to property lines may be reduced by up to 25%, provided that setbacks to schools are not thereby reduced below minimum. And I've added 2 parentheses. The setback reduction request must meet the variance criteria found in Chapter 8, Section 6 to be approved. And my reason for this is application of this variance criteria will help the commissioners make their decision on setback reduction requests based on specific benchmarks and remove the possibility of arbitrariness. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Travis. All right. Brad?
Yeah, thanks. Brad Burritt, 12125 Burritt Road, Hotchkiss. First, I would like to address battery and energy storage systems. I wasn't going to speak. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into the amendment. But after Mr. Larker brought up site plan review and the extensive discussion about setbacks, I'm concerned that I don't understand the commercial BESS requirement where it's approved with site plan review, as in the section 2.2. And then the important part is then in 14.2 definitions. That's where my question lies.
2.2. I just wanted to catch these.
Sure.
Where is it? Am I here?
I'm sorry, 14.2.
In the definition section.
Definition section.
Well, yeah. Yeah, let's just look at the definitions. That's where my question is.
Okay.
Yeah, so for in this table, there you go.
That's your intention.
Yep. Are the setbacks referred to the 15-foot setbacks to property line for like to construct a house, or I think it's 5 feet for a habitable structure?
Yes, it would fall under the standard setbacks.
Okay, so that's the setback referred to.
Right.
All right. So BESS for a commercial system wouldn't be installed closer than those setbacks.
Correct. Sorry, I'm processing all of this
Sure.
myself as you ask, but
Sure.
yes, that's the intent. And we'll touch a little bit more on site plan review when I get a chance to respond to the comments on site plan reviews. But the intent there is to just check to see if we need a different kind of permit mostly.
Sure. Okay. Is this list inclusive? Does it include everything that's going to be reviewed in the site plan review for a commercial?
There's another
Unless it's
section of
standard
the
code,
code
whatever.
there's another section of the code that lists out what's incorporated in site plan review. Basically, it's an aerial view of the site showing where this facility or structure is going.
Sure.
And giving dimensions for setbacks. And then we check plats, recorded plats and such to make sure you're not encumbering, some kind of a right of way or some kind of anything that's on a plat or a plat restriction you're not violating.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then finally, technical thing, that 9540A, I believe, is a test and not an actual certification. UL 9540 is a certification and 9540A is the fire test. So you might want the word test instead of certification there.
Okay.
Which is a very technical thing, but.
Okay.
I think we want the certification.
Well, they certified the equipment, the UL certification is what I think we're understanding. It's a test and then.
Yeah.
And then the equipment
certified.
gets UL certified,
It has to be
right?
certified.
Is that incorrect?
Not the way I read it, but it's,
Okay.
it's not gonna matter. If you're looking for a 9540A, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Then regarding the setbacks to intensive ag, I learned a lot this evening and I share the concerns, especially for A35 property designations. That's probably what ours is. Yeah, so I appreciate that that's being considered. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I live at 28506 Redlands Mesa Road. I don't have papers and I'm unprepared, but I'm familiar with the land use code and I want to talk about the setback reductions. Yes, the first thing is I just wanted to clarify that the standard for industrial agriculture is the 1,000 feet. And that's clearly laid out. And the intent of that is to protect people. Those are protected setbacks. And then you go down farther in that section, and the last section is section 11 that talks about the modifications. And it says, the standard may be modified. So it's the standard and it's the law that may be modified. But unfortunately, the way that this whole permit has gone, conditional use permit has gone down with the Hostellers chicken barn, the modification has become the standard. Many people got up and talked about why this was no case for a conditional use permit. A conditional use permit is also called a special use permit. So it's a modification to the law under special circumstances that warrant it. And that all just kind of got erased and it became just an allowed thing. This isn't a good case for a special exception. What ended up happening with this is I live directly to the north of the the permitted site now. And so they've been permitted to put, it's a 530-foot long chicken barn. You know, this is with industrial fans blowing out. There's a lot of concerns about that. So the entire length of that is 500 feet from my property line. So maximum, there's been a ton of people saying that we want the protections of the law. We want strong laws we can count on. And what ended up happening, the people said that, the Planning Commission recommended that this be denied, and the commissioners went against the people, went against the Planning Commission, made maximum use of the potential allowance, and we're not giving enough of that small word may. You know, if we need to take it seriously, if we're modifying a law that's there for a reason, we need to consider seriously if this modification makes sense. And that didn't happen. So I really think, Nomi mentioned that there should be a tighter conditional use process. It shouldn't come down to 3 people's decision, arbitrary decision. We were never told why this is deserving of the modification. Sorry, I'm getting redundant now, but yeah, I think the intention of the master plan, as I read it, it wants to give people clear laws they can count on. It wants to protect people. It wants to allow for business and innovation, and a land use code is supposed to make that go smoothly and put things where they're compatible. A conditional use permit should be compatible with the surrounding area, and the community has spoken and said that it doesn't, a lot of people have spoken up and said that this doesn't feel compatible. So I'd like to see some tightness in the process. And if we can't do that, maybe just get rid of the whole modification thing and have it be clear and stick with the standard. And if we can't do that, I would suggest not giving the commissioners a wide berth to interpret things as they see fit, because they have not done a good job with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. All right.
Wait, so what that means, the wide berth, thank you, is let's not push it and make it the biggest thing, because when May gets pushed to allowed, you know, in this case, if we can't do some of that deeper work, then we should shrink the distance and put that in writing.
All right.
I think.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we have one more person on the list, and then I think someone came in late. Did you want to add your name to the list to speak?
I do. I signed something, but I didn't check the right.
You didn't check the right box. What is your name?
Cindy Swartzberg.
All right, Cindy.
I'll wait till the end.
Okay, sounds good. Eli, if you would like to speak now, then we'll have Cindy.
Sounds great. I'm Eli Wilcott, Paonia, Colorado, Stucker Mesa Road. Although I manage a couple dozen farms and ranches across the county. I know many of you. I've sat for a couple of years on the Planning Commission, so I understand some of the deliberations that you guys have. Although today I'm here to represent the Delta County Coalition. We're a public-private civic partnership group that's been working with the county for several years since the 2024 land use revision happened. We have about 1,400 constituent members. We had a recent meeting to review some of these proposed changes. We did submit comments. I hope that you all received those. I think they were forwarded to you, Warren.
They're in your this comment needed.
And we've been involved, going back to 2018 and prior with with land use code and, this entire process. So I certainly appreciate the time and energy that it takes to read through all of this and get through it. I think, there's about 5 topics that I'll try to touch on fairly quickly, that we have concerns about. I think that, we could just start quickly with the ADUs. I think we're seeing across the state, these statutes that are on the Front Range, opening up the opportunity for more ADUs and trying to alleviate the housing crisis and housing costs that we have well across the country and in Colorado and in Delta County. And we had numerous meetings with the commissioners, with Warren's predecessors, looking at the ADU standards and coming up with this fairly broad standard of the ADU. Needs to be smaller than the primary residence. And I believe that we're seeing some proposals to tighten that up considerably. I guess after having a pretty extensive couple of meetings with quite a number of county residents, there is a big question of, is there a need for that and why? There's a very clear need for additional housing in the county, whether that's worker housing or farm worker housing or otherwise. We certainly have a crunch there. So I think that feedback that we would bring would be to ask you to consider leaving in place the current kind of compromise of allowing ADUs as long as they're smaller than the primary residence, instead of really tightening down those exact square footage numbers. So we'll check that one off, ADU off the list. Next one's a little bit bigger topic, but I'll try to get through all of these very quickly. The site plan review, going all the way back to the 2020 initial land use code that we came to from specific development. There were just a lot of assurances made to the community as a whole, with meetings held all over the county, assuring people that what is allowed by right would remain allowed by right, and that there would not be hoops set up like this proposed site plan review. That conversation continued right through 2024 in public hearings and public meetings, those kind of assurances that we would maintain allowed by right. Now, that doesn't mean that residents don't need to follow the rules or get permits. It just means that we're treating them like adults and allowing them the flexibility to run their businesses or their farms or their lives without needing an extensive, potentially expensive review or delays in the process. So I'd really, I know this is a tough process, but I'd really reach out to each of you to please carry forward those promises that were really emphatically made to the residents of the county to maintain those allowed by right uses as truly allowed by right. It's one of the reasons why we went through the process twice with the 2024 land use code, was looking at whether to move away from allowed by right and then coming back fully to the allowed by right. I'll keep moving along. We've certainly heard a lot of comments tonight, and I'll just quickly echo some of those. I think our constituents, in terms of the setback question, the main feedback that I was charged with bringing forward was looking at clearer standards for the exemption, and people really wanting to see, well, in what cases would that 50% reduction in setbacks possibly be applied, and not feeling like it could be arbitrary, and that it's something that they could really rest on and be confident in. So I think that's the kind of clear, constructive information to bring forward there. We sent forward some comments on the events. We held over a dozen meetings with our coalition and the county commissioners and Warren's predecessors, specifically going through events. We really spent a lot of time on that. And I think that Carl brought forward to those of you commissioners who were there in 2024, the results of a lot of those compromises. We were a little surprised to see some proposed changes now, because we spent so much time hammering that out. I don't want to take up 20 minutes of time getting into all of the details. And so I hope that you have our comments in front of you, but I generally would encourage you to look at maintaining the current compromise and work that was done in 2024 around the events. There was obviously agritourism and events are a big economic driver in Delta County, very important here. And I think that we really spent a lot of time hammering out compromises, looking at what can be done. Clearly, there's a big difference between existing events and newly proposed events, especially in residential areas. And there's a carve out for exempt events, things like hay rides and farmers market stands and this kind of thing. And so I think I would just encourage you to take a hard look at what we have. I think it's working pretty well. I think from what I've been watching and seeing, and most of our constituents have brought forward, it's really the new proposed event spaces that are brand new, coming from out of the county, from neighboring counties, that sort of thing, that have brought up friction and questions, and maybe those are worth looking at. But certainly we want to support our farmers and ranchers in agritourism and people hosting events in the county. Just check my notes here, bear with me, and I'll wrap this up. Finally, I just want to wrap up, and we had a pretty good brainstorm conversation with some of the other officials here at the county last week. But we've really run into, and I think you all have probably had discussions about this question of the Board of Adjustments. And through the process of the development of the land use code, there was quite a lot of community concern about the Board of Adjustments being the kind of ultimate arbiter of appeals. And what was presented at all of these previous community meetings and hearings was that although the Board of Adjustments is fairly small and it's appointed, it's not elected, that ultimately any decision could be appealed to and would be made by the county commissioners, who are elected and are our representatives. And I think that in the current proposed changes that you guys have here, it talks about this statute that I guess John Bayer has run into, stating that a decision of the Board of Adjustment, it's called Board of Adjustments, but it's really Board of Appeals. You can just think of it that way. Cannot be appealed unless you go to court, which of course is a huge burden for most county residents. And with a fairly small Board of Adjustments, and I know they work very hard at what they do, but they are all volunteers. And just as you get swamped in packets, I know I've sat in your seat before, they do as well. And so this assurance that's been made to the county residents over and over again, that if anything goes off track with the Board of Adjustments or down the road, that the county commissioners will ultimately, as elected officials, look at things and set them right if needed, in the current draft that you have, has been removed. And so we have not had a chance to really investigate the statute and how that might be creatively addressed, but we had a very productive conversation just last week with some of the other county officials about trying to creatively find a solution to move forward with that. A couple of the ideas that we discussed, and again, these are just in the kind of brainstorming phase. One was expanding the number of seats in the Board of Adjustments to have a kind of reflect something similar to the Planning Commission, where there might be 3 seats, 3 from each of the districts, some alternates, and expand it from the current very small number so that there is a wider representation and more eyeballs and maybe more brains on any given tough problem, which the Board of Adjustment is going to be looking at tough problems. Another possible solution that we looked at was adding the county commissioners to the Board of Adjustments, expanding the number of seats in the Board of Adjustments and making the county commissioners part of the Board of Adjustments, kind of automatically appointed to it, so that the county's elected officials would be part of any serious appeal or resolution process that might happen. And we discussed a couple of other ideas that might also be ways that this could be addressed. Another one would be the possibility of a sort of diversion option. Before going to the Board of Adjustment, an applicant could decide instead to take it to the county commissioners so that they can seek relief from their elected officials. I don't think that we've had time just in the last week, I feel, to really dive into these details and the legal implications, but we've had some very positive, productive, constructive conversations just getting these ideas going. How can we kind of address this so that when serious conflict and issues come up and there's questions about interpretation of the code and so on, how can that really be resolved? And people feel confident that it will be with their elected officials. And enough people, 3 volunteers, and maybe only 2 show up at a Board of Adjustment meeting, 2 volunteers who are expected to read an 80-page packet, which is going to determine the future of someone's farm or livelihood. It's a lot to put on 2 people. So I just want to share all of that. I think I would also echo TK just a little bit and respectfully requesting that maybe you just take a little bit more time in looking at some of these issues. I think that, there was a lot of work done and time taken in 2024, and I think, a little bit more time to get this really right. I think that this could move forward and sail forward more easily and smoothly with just a little bit more work. I know it's been a lot of work so far, and I appreciate all the effort and energy that you guys have put into it. And great seeing some new faces here. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're right. And one more. Cindy, would you like to come up?
I'll just stand right here. My name is Cindy Swartzendruber. I live at 38700 Sucker Mesa Road. I am the president of Sucker Mesa Domestic Water Company, and so my questions and concerns have everything to do about water. And it's mostly about the process rather than a written statute. So I'm not real familiar with land use code, but looking at some of the things that were on the printout for this. For instance, in the ADU, it said that the ADU had to use, it couldn't use a cistern and it had to use the same water as the resident. However, unless there was another water provider. My question is, how would we, as the other water provider, even know? What is the process? So if somebody, and I really compliment you on the site use plan, because that would give us as a water company, we're not an HOA and we don't want to be, but if there's a site use plan, then we as a water company can come and look at something and know what's planned and know what's happening. But my greater concern is, how is that communicated back to water companies? There's a ton of small water companies, especially in the Paonia-Hotchkiss end of the county. What communication would we ever get on what the site use plan is, on what the ADU is? I think in my limited experience, there's a little bit of a disconnect then about how this is done and then how that is communicated back to the water provider. And so I would just like to, put that little bug in your ear that is a little piece that needs to be probably not written in the statute, but certainly a process that needs to be communicated to the water provider whenever and however this comes to completion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I want to thank everyone for their comments. Everyone did a great job staying succinct, and we really appreciate everyone's comments. I've taken pretty extensive notes on the things that seem to be the major issues that people are finding or wanting some clarification or adjustment in the language. I do want to kind of mention that our intent tonight is really to address issues where we are seeking more clarity, making kind of administrative edits just to make the land use code flow better, and not to change kind of decisions, big standard decisions. So while I hear everyone's comments about setbacks, and we can discuss this as a planning commission, I think what we're really trying to do tonight is not open up the can of worms in terms of how far is too far, what, how much setbacks can really be reduced, but to clarify some things so that the process, so that people reading the code know where we're at. The bigger philosophical issues about what belongs where in the county, and those sort of things, I think are better addressed for potentially the future. That's a much bigger project than we're kind of prepared to do right now. Of course, if anyone on the commission wants to really address or propose language based on what they have heard here, that is always an option. And then there was a couple of just kind of questions that I wanted to give staff or us the chance to answer about the intent and the process. The first question that I heard was, just kind of like, how do conditions on conditional use permits get monitored or regulated once we've put those in place? Everett, do you want to speak to that?
Certainly. But it'd be better if the director addressed it.
Well, he's the director now. But I just had one point to maybe set up, follow. But first of all, a conditional use permit is exactly what it it's called a conditional use permit. So not all the conditions for the development are necessarily met at the time of approval. Some of those require a tremendous amount of investment that people aren't ready to make unless they know that they're going to be allowed to do the development. And so they're added as conditions for approval for the conditional use permit. At the time, before they can operate, usually the condition says before operation, this condition has to be met. How that's done, how that's reviewed is that before they operate, they need to provide the planning department evidence of that condition having been met. Those are conditions related to the development of the development. There are other conditions that pertain to the operation of the development after it's built and started in operation. Those fall to code compliance. That's a matter of compliance with the operational condition that was put into the permit. And then you can speak to that.
So that's what I was saying. There's a wide range. You know, a perfect example, we just had that one event that was 3 days. That was 14 hours of my time because the amount of monitoring that needed to take place. So different conditions require different kind of monitoring. A lot of the times we'll have, someone will have questions and they'll say, hey, I got this going on over here. It's a complaint style called in, just want you to check on it. We can go check on the conditions, monitor the conditions such as maybe a truck route. Like someone brought up already, hey, that truck is driving on this road and according to what we understand the conditions, they aren't supposed to take this as a truck route. Sometimes they're sustained, but as far as I'll go up there and they'll say, yeah, I had a contract driver. He wasn't supposed to do that. I'll make sure that I talk to the company. And we document that I went up there and I talked to him about it. And other times we've gone up there and it turns out it's not even their truck. So I've actually brought in, they took pictures of the truck driving by and I brought it to the operations guy. So that's not even my truck. So it depends. We have some conditions where people are, we've had perfect example, we have some dust complaints that have come in. Well, it's kind of hard to catch a dust complaint after the dust has already been there and gone. So again, conditioning and monitoring for enforcement is also, it's not so much the enforcement as it's actually, this is kind of different than code enforcement. This is just monitoring. We're monitoring the conditions that, like, we have a certain company that does travel on some of our roads. Well, some of the road damage is due to their extensive travel with heavy vehicles. I go out there, been reported there's a pothole. We go out and we look at it and I go, yeah, that's a pothole. So I contact the company, we make arrangements as to who's going to share the price of repairing the road. So there's constant monitoring and conditions and compliance that takes place. Working on more staffing, of course, we want to have an annual review every year of every limited use permit and every conditional use permit. Well, as you can imagine, I'm one person for the entire county. So I will have to take the last 3 months of the year off so I can go visit every single place that is needed, because we have what we call mission creep, where people start off with this plan and we come out there and, oh, there's a couple other things going on and maybe a little bit of this. And again, our goal, hey, you need to come in, you need to amend your permit, you're outside your conditions and your provisions. Let's talk, let's figure it out, or it's just, you can't do that. So honestly, there's no real straight one-way monitoring standard. Everything is different, everything has its own application. But that does fall on us to continually monitor, and a lot of times it is phone call driven, because we have changed it so that we don't have to have a written complaint. We just call and inquire. Some of it comes across my desk during projects. We see a project come across that we're aware of, and I go, whoa, that's already been something else. We head down a different path. So monitoring is the responsibility of the county as well, to check on these things, watch for mission creep, and that they're meeting those accountabilities. As far as other things like air monitoring, that depends on if it's a state air monitoring. If it's through CDPHE, I'll never see it. If it's A-pins, gravel pits, that's outside my scope, because that goes into a CDPHE monitoring system. We can ask for their logs, but that's a higher level than what I do.
All right. The other question that seemed to come up a couple times is what, putting site plan review back into the land use code is a fairly big edit. It came from realizing over the last several years that there are projects that would have much better been reviewed than let go and then told to stop after they're midway through the project or after they're done, or, the cost of mitigating a lot of these things is a lot greater than the cost of checking a plat to make sure you're putting your thing where it should go. Sean, will you talk about what will that look like?
Okay, where to begin with this? A site plan review is really spelled out in chapter 7, section 1 of the land use code, what it entails. And really, it addresses your question, sorry I forgot your name, but about water purveyors. How would they know? How would you know that somebody put an ADU on their property and just used the tap from their house and ran it out there? If you have a policy in your water company to get another tap, right? You would know that. We wouldn't know that without a site plan review. How would we know that? People just put them up and then they illegally tap into the tap that they have going against their water purveyor. That's an issue, I guess, that has been left to the water purveyor and the customer. You got to police it, right? But site plan review, the standards for it are basically to get a site plan, and there's a section of the code that specifies what's in a site plan. It's just a drawing of your property, where all the structures are at with dimensions, essentially. And it shows waterways, wells, and other features that have setback requirements from them, so that we can just verify and say, yes, that's a good place to put it. But what our site plan review is really is a verification and an instruction service. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. And it shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 days. Now, in the past, I've heard that it has taken a long time, but I've talked with the staff and there's a clear way that we can expedite that. And all it is the county putting its thumbprint on it saying, we're seeing what you're doing. You don't need any other permits, or maybe if you do, we can advise you at that point and say, you're actually going to need a permit for X, Y, or Z. And we check for setbacks according to the code. We check like recorded plats to make sure you're not violating any encumbrances that are recorded for your property that you may not be aware of. And many people are not aware of all of them. And so it's a service really to help people to not shoot themselves in the foot and to give them instructions on other things they may need to do to develop properly. And one of those things, a great example would be, you need to talk to your water purveyor. They actually would need to bring some kind of a letter. Just a letter will do, saying the water purveyor recognizes that they're building an ADU and this is their policy for that. They can tap into the existing line. Some water companies allow that, or whatever. Or they may say, you need to get another tap. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people don't want to have that told to them, and that's why they don't want to have a site plan review. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the intent of the site plan review. It checks your site plan and your declared activities. This is one additional thing that we put in the site plan review standards, was one extra line that said, please provide a description of what your activities are, because some things may not be adding any new structures. We've had, for example, a gathering place that already had an existing structure there. They didn't come in for a permit because they didn't need to. And then they wanted to have activities in there. So the site plan wouldn't really tell us anything. We're not really approving any new structures that aren't already there. But the activities that they wanted to conduct in there were a significant change of use to the property. They wanted to bring in a lot of people from the public to use that facility that was already built there. And so without knowing what the activities are that people are intending in their land use, we wouldn't be able to review that. So that's what we added into the site plan review, is a declaration of what your activities are. The end result of that is basically it's a verification We check structures meet setbacks, encumbrances, and water supply. We check for compliance with any other laws, statutes. We don't send it to any external or state or federal agencies. We may check it with internal departments of the county. And then we advise the property owners of things like, oh, we have an intergovernmental agreement with CDOT for the section of highway that you're on. You might need to, check with them to see if you have the appropriate access permit for that activity or whatnot that you want to do. In such a case as that, the instruction would probably be, you actually need a permit for that. I know you thought it was an allowed use, but it's actually not. And that's one of the purposes of bringing the site plan review back also, is that people make errors in their presumptions that they are doing something that falls under an allowed use, and maybe they misinterpreted or just misread something. And so again, the site plan review is a public service to review those things to make sure that people are actually having, are doing something that's an allowed use. Did that answer the question? Or
I
do
think
I
that
need to send it
helps.
back?
I think just to clarify that the standards for the review process were already in the land use code. What has changed is that there are some types of development that will now require a site plan review that did not in previous versions of the land use code. Anything that is a conditional use permit, a limited use permit, already goes through those steps. We're really talking about changes in activities or development that in old versions of the code could just be done with no review at all. Now,
Just to clarify, I believe Wendell put this forward in 24, but site plan review is available for anyone they
Yes.
can opt in at any time.
Yes.
So anyone who wants to double check can always come into the county and say, hey, will you check this over for me?
It's true. Yeah.
so the change would be making that required, not optional for many land uses.
It says the land use, no, the site permit.
Site plan review.
Yeah, I mean, those are gonna be transparent and accessible for people to see in the county. They're not confidential.
Nothing that we do is confidential. If someone does a core request, we plan on recording these. So we do a site plan review. Some of these are gonna come and say, hey, I wanna build a shed. We can look at that real quick, look at the property, and we'll still create a document because they're gonna fill out the form for the site plan review. Then we're gonna have a form letter that we complete that says, hey, the proposed project, here's a site plan. We find it doesn't need a permit, it's not violating anything or being in easements. And then we put that in a folder in our planning department files. We'll put it under SPR. Someone does a core request for an SPR for a property, we are obligated through transparency to provide that.
But they will not be publicly noticed.
Right.
It's not like anytime you come in for a site plan review, your neighbors are gonna get a letter in the mail saying so-and-so is planning on building a shed. I want to,
Can I
Yeah.
just say one last thing about the site plan reviews? I wanted to talk about what the potential benefits are to the property owners if we were to make it a requirement, and the benefits to the county from having the experience in the last year and a half of not having it required for all developments. Benefits to property owners and to their neighbors are, number one, planning will process expediently and will only be shared with other county departments, not with state agencies. Number two, there's no fee for site plan review. There are fees for applications for other permits like access and address, but we'll provide instruction about those in the site plan review. It helps to avoid unlawful non-conforming development on accidents of presumption by a property owner's misinterpretation of the land use code. This is a really big deal, I think. People, if they read it and they think, oh, I'm an allowed use, don't check, they can easily shoot themselves in the foot. And that creates problems for them, for the neighbors, and for us later on. Site plan review approval provides a snapshot in time also of what the county reviewed and approved. And it protects the property owner from any kind of a false charges in the future from neighbors that say, hey, you were supposed to do something, or you'll get a permit for this. And they can say, I went to the planning department and I had them review it and they gave me this letter that says I can do this. This is an allowed use. I didn't need any further permit. It also, I mean, chiefly, it's really a service. It provides guidance and instructions to property owners on how to develop lawfully and obtain permits for access, address, and septic. And it informs them of any other kinds of government agreements or plat restrictions that they may be subject to and not know about. The benefits to the county, it enables us to exercise our responsibilities with regard to our intergovernmental agreements. We can't exercise those responsibilities with our intergovernmental agreements with towns or with state agencies if we don't know about the development and it just goes through and people do it without our participation. We can't inform them and we can't exercise our responsibility in that intergovernmental agreement that we signed. It avoids other departments having to bring us development projects that have violated some code or encumbrance after the fact to correct before they can issue their development permit. So we've had several occasions where the engineering department, somebody applied for an access permit to their property and then come to find out, it's like, they bring it to us and it's like, can they do this? Don't they need a permit for this? And here we are going around this circle. It's like, yeah, they should have. And so then they hold back their access permit until they talk to us in planning, and then we get them up to speed and permitted, or at least started an application for a development permit so that they can proceed with their access permit that they're eager to get. So it hinders the developer a lot of times if they've done things out of order like that. It enables first responders and emergency response. It enables better record keeping for data on the county. These are some of the reasons why we feel like if we make it quick, we make it free, it's a public service and it can help people to avoid making errors.
So we've heard a lot of feedback from our members about.
Well, Eli, I don't want to open this up to just a back and forth conversation, I guess, just looking at the time. You have submitted your comments about site plan reviews and spoken about how your coalition feels about them. At this point, I think I would open it up to the Planning Commission for discussion if anyone would like to propose any edits to the text as we have them, based on the comments we've heard and read.
For any of the sections?
Yeah, I mean, the main things that I feel like we heard were about setbacks, about the, reduction percentages and totals, potentially about like the definition of the residential use and worry that we're not capturing some folks that are in residential uses on ag land. Eli's comments about ADUs and site plan reviews. Please let me know if there's something else on your mind as
Definition
well.
of home business was another one that was brought up.
Definition of home business.
Hours of operation, days.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I would open it up to conversation about anything, if someone wants to start us off. If, I really want to go, if anyone wants to propose language, let's do it kind of officially. And incorporate that into the exhibits that we will then resolve to approve. Is there inclination to editing any of this text after hearing the comments?
I think specifically on the setbacks. My understanding of this was that. And I don't know if anybody in the planning department can answer this, but if somebody has their primary residence on their farm, that there is a portion of that is tax assessed residential.
That's my understanding, unless the assessor hasn't kept up with like a new house on the property. I got the land use map up here, for example, and this is right here, subject or next to the Hostetler property that just was conditionally approved for the intensive agriculture. So you click on this, you go to view the assessor's site, right over here, this is how that property is assessed. Yeah, it's an A35 zoning district, but it has this residential, this code 1112 is a residential assessment. Even though it's A35, and here's that property right here.
That's mine.
Okay. So these tax assessed residential. All of these properties around here were tax assessed residential, even though they may have agricultural activity or not, and they're in an A35 zoning district. They're tax assessed residential, so they fell under the residential use definition.
Okay, so and that was my understanding, and I wanted to make sure we were differentiating between a misunderstanding of zoning and what it was being tax assessed as, because that's not, our code doesn't point to what it's zoned as, it's what it's tax assessed as. You know, I know when we discussed this, you know, we felt like to some extent the 1,000 foot setback was so limiting that by default it was almost banning it. And if you take, a property and just a single dot, never mind the size of whatever building they're proposing, and you go 1,000 feet in every direction, that's a 92 acre parcel. Like there's just not a lot of parcels that are gonna fall under like that in this county. I'm not saying that that's maybe not what should be required for an intensive agricultural operation, but that was, I know, kind of our feeling was like, wow, we've made this so limiting that we might as well just put a moratorium on it. I know, there's some confusion about whether we're changing the reduction to 50%, which we aren't, and I understand that. That we're just trying to be more clear about what the residential uses are, and that 25% setback applies to properties that don't meet that definition. But I don't know, maybe we should consider just a flat like 25%.
I'm in favor of.
I do think it makes sense, in these cases, I get it, it doesn't provide. Somebody made the comment, and I had this thought when we were going over it, if we provide this allowance, the standard means nothing. Because they're gonna do that every time. We either just change the standard to 500 feet, which I'm not in favor of. But I think by at least going to 25% across the board, if we can propose that language to the county commissioners, I feel like we're at least taking some of the input we've heard tonight, and we're trying to meet them a little closer.
And like one of the public speak tonight was, we were talking about the standard. We keep talking about the standard, but if we modify the standard, the modification becomes the standard. And I think that we really need to, I think, and I agree with you, when we were thinking about this, I think we were thinking it was so constraining the way it was set up to allow some additional freedom. And it's such a balance there. There's a balance between protection. There's a balance between business and where home business falls, and where it really draws the line of being home business versus business. And of course, that balance at the end, it comes down to that balance.
And maybe it's not all bad if an operation that wants to put up a 550 foot long, I'm all for it. I love agriculture. But maybe you need to own 120 acres to do this.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
Properly sized.
correct. Yeah, not 40 foot by 10,000 feet, but I don't feel like it's that restrictive. I feel like it still allows it, and I would be in favor of just changing it across the board to 25%.
I think that would clarify a lot.
And it almost removes the need for us to clarify what these definitions are.
Which one's 1,000, which one's 100.
Yep.
Okay. And is there some comments, asked for some stipulations or kind of like, you know, a list of specifics, like specific, I lost the word, criteria. Is there any inclination to add those? I feel like that's a little bit beyond what we can do tonight. But
I think
changing
that's
it to 25% potentially could, yeah, get us a lot of the way there.
I think so.
Okay. Is
Only
anyone?
thing I have.
Right.
All right, it's all right, it's all right.
I just think.
Who haven't we heard from on the board, okay, just besides?
Yeah, I just want to make sure,
Sure.
Dave, you feel good
I
with that?
agree
Okay.
with what he said.
Yes.
I think there are other concerns. I think TK had a lot of good ideas, but I don't think we can deal with it tonight. So
Yeah.
I'm asking procedurally, how do we move forward with those?
I would suggest that someone make a formal motion to add or to adjust the language. And then when someone makes a formal motion to do the full resolution, essentially the edited language will be included as an exhibit.
Nomi wrote it out pretty good in her comments. She gave verbiage for it. I don't see anything wrong with that. So it says setbacks for intensive agricultural uses shall only be modified through a conditional use review process described in chapter 8 in accordance with the following limitations. Setbacks to property lines may be reduced by up to 25%, provided that setbacks to schools are not thereby reduced below minimum.
All
So
right.
it's just striking point 1.
Essentially striking point 1
Okay.
and removing the green line.
Yeah.
Restoring point 2 back to
restoring
its
point 2, yeah.
To its original.
I don't
Do
know.
we need a
what-
formal motion or do we?
Yeah,
I think
but I
we
just would wonder what the implications of that we may not understand. I don't know what the differentiation is totally with residential use and property lines as it is expressed up here in this table.
I think the confusion with as it was written before this was that the language said setbacks from residential uses could be reduced by up to 50%. And there was confusion during the Hostetler application about whether that meant setback from the residence or from the property line.
Yeah, and
But
the
if we
definition of
strike-
residential uses for purposes of this section means any property, whether developed or not, that is zoned A5, A2.5, or Res 1, and any other property that has a residential tax assessment indicating residential use of the property. For the purposes of measuring setbacks for intensive agriculture, the setback should be measured from the property line of the property that meets the residential use definition.
So if we don't mention residential uses specifically in the modifications language, it's just 25% from these standards. And you have to follow the definition of each of those standards.
And to alleviate that concern, we can just simply keep our change as it is and just change 50 to 25.
Yep, right.
All right, can we go back down to that language?
Are you talking about point 1?
Yeah, so keep our change in
That to right here,
exactly as it is, but we're just changing 50 to 25.
just change that right there. It's highlighted right here to 25.
Correct.
That would be 750 feet from the property line.
Correct.
Just as a little bit of context on this, I don't know, these setbacks, was originally set with predetermined reduction allowances, okay, for some reason. And I don't know what the historical reason was for that. So this will requires probably, I would think it should require a little bit of deliberation about like what was the reason for allowing it to be reduced to 50%. But that's your guys' call. As the code stands today, even if this text amendment as it is proposed up there right now is approved, residential property owners are protected by having to go through the conditional use process, public hearings to request an allowable setback reduction, and they're guaranteed a minimum of 500 feet setback from their property line. And just for some context, in Montrose County, structures and pens in the general agricultural district have to put a baseline minimum property setback of 25 feet from the front of the property line and 10 feet from all the other property lines. So in Montrose County, our neighboring county, if you gotta be 1,000 feet or 750 feet from the property line, you only have to be 25 or 10 feet from the property line in Montrose County. In Mesa County, intensive agriculture must be at least a quarter mile from any existing dwelling, not from the property line of a tax assessed residential property, but from the house. So these are our neighbors to the north and south and what they're doing. And it has implications, I guess, if you're somebody that's trying to make a living in agriculture. Are you gonna wanna do it in Delta County or Montrose County? With these standards.
agriculture.
Intensive agriculture, that's right. Thank you. So that's just a little context.
But doesn't that come into, sorry, picking your land appropriately? Because the one in question had 120 acres.
It did.
But the way it was set up was not conducive to it, and I agree with what you said. So I think it's picking the property to fit the need instead of forcing everybody around you to have to deal with it.
I agree with that totally. I think we've made it too easy to get variances. Hostetler's knew from Jump Street that they wouldn't be able to meet the minimum requirements, but they thought historically we've granted variances too easily, and I think that there would be more restrictions on that.
I want to clarify that this is not a variance. A variance is granted by the Board of Adjustment, not the county commissioners. This is a built-in, predetermined allowance of a reduction to setbacks for whatever reason on the one criteria that evaluating the concentration of intensive ag in the vicinity. That's the one criteria, and the Board of County Commissioners makes a determination to allow that variant, or to allow that reduction or not. And to Ms. Haven's point, maybe there should be more specific criteria for evaluating whether or not there is a what's the concentration of intensive ag in the vicinity? What are the cumulative impacts of that intensive ag in that area? So that the Board of County Commissioners make a more informed decision about that allowance.
So your concern is by changing this, we're gonna make Delta County less friendly to agriculture.
That's one potential thing. I think right now the suggested edit is saying no change to what we've had, just more clarification about what it's intending to mean based upon the recent interpretation from the commissioners in a recent occasion, that gave some clarity to this, and then we're just clarifying it. Now, if you want to change the policy altogether, I mean, there are some great suggestions by TK about like things to visit more holistically about intensive agriculture, like the animal unit counts as determining the setback, distances. That seems like something to kind of take another approach at on a future maybe amendment. And my hope is that we can make amendments more regularly and smaller ones, like just one on this could be one amendment, that the TC and the VOCC, everybody can work through. But to just like make a quick call on like doing that adjustment that you're talking about, I'm just noting that it sounds a little precarious to me without thinking about it. This doesn't change what's there.
I know what you're saying, but there is absolutely no guidance or justification to why it is the way it is.
I didn't build what was there. I'm just saying that what we're doing right here is
We're not really doing anything different.
we're not doing anything different. That is my point. We're just giving clarity about these two clauses that seem to be a bit ambiguous. What you're suggesting is a significant modification.
Big change.
So maybe we should rethink it as well.
So it's just a thought.
I'm a little torn on that.
Yeah.
I think we know kind of what, at least the public that has come out, what their sentiment is about this. And we have been trying to do these edits in a way that is not big policy change. I will say that the site plan review is big policy change. yeah, I guess I just wonder what, without knowing at all whether the BOCC, what they think about this, if this is gonna like keep kicking this back and then refusing our copy if we're, you know.
If we don't do anything,
can almost
Kate,
guarantee it.
the BOCC would make the final determination, correct? If we left it as is,
They have the say to reject our changes or send them back to us, send it
or
back
if we
to
don't
us.
make the change, they then could review it and decide whether it's sufficient or.
If we send it to them as is, they can make edits and send it back to us.
Mhm.
If we make edits here and send it to them, they could
Reject them. they
reject
could-
it.
I think we change it and see if they reject it.
I would just like to make a quick point of order, which is that, let's look at the history of, they clearly have a different view of the setbacks because they approved
Yeah.
what you guys denied. So I think it's very important that we take into consideration when we make this kind of a change that we already know, they have literally sided not with you on this. So it's been
Correct.
made really clear that where they stand, this might require a lot more back and forth than us making a decision that came at the last minute at the goalposts after the field.
Question, then why are we even doing this?
This would have been brought up when it
This-
first came up. We could have changed it when we first started this. This is just for clarification. That was determined what was needed. We're now at the point where we've already kicked the ball. We're watching it fly to the goalpost. And this should have been done from the onset. Because this is a much bigger.
Yeah, but that's the
We
point
didn't
of a
have-
public hearing.
Yeah, we didn't have the
We
public.
didn't have public hearing at that point.
Because I
So-
think the setback reduction has been too much. I think 50% is too much. It's hard for a homeowner, property owner to know what is gonna happen on those adjacent properties because of that. So I like the 25%. I understand what we're saying, but we've heard from the public that showed up today that 50% is too much. They can't count on
What
it.
about if we did it as a recommendation? Versus.
That's what we're doing.
Like I'm saying, I mean,
That's
that's you're
what we're
saying,
doing.
so we're doing it as a recommendation, then they could still keep it at 50%, or they could
They
change.
could change our language
Then it's
back.
on them.
They don't listen.
They don't listen to us either.
Well, listen,
All right, I think, yeah, I think all your points are valid. I would, especially since this is a fairly big edit, I would ask for a formal motion and second, and we'll vote on on editing the text. And then if anyone else has inclination to edit any of the other text, we'll go through the same process, and then we will vote on the final resolution to send to the BOCC.
I would make a motion that we modify our change to section 2.4 11A subsection 1 to read setbacks to residential uses as defined in subsection 2 of this section on intensive agriculture may be reduced by up to 25%. Semicolon and.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right,
But I think it's section 11, isn't it? You said 2?
it's 2.411A1.
Yeah. Second.
Okay, so motion has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, motion passes. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeas, 1 nay. So we will make that edit in real time to this document.
We will make it in real time. Okay.
Well, don't we have to make it in real time to approve?
Well,
Then
I wanted to just list them all,
Okay.
and then I'll go back and do it.
we'll make it by the time we have a formal resolution.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other elements that this commission would like to review language on?
I will make it in real time, right here, right in front of you. You ready? So you're proposing, that to be reduced to 25. Here we go. 25. Dave.
There you go.
Oh, is it say 50 also?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. Good Lord, it's hard to find the darn thing once I look in there.
so far.
I don't have a search bar, you have to figure out what you're gonna search for.
So 25 here. Thank you for that. Got it. Click on this, that's gonna screw it up again. Sorry, it's hard to make it. That's why I was gonna write them down and do it afterwards.
Yeah, you can take off whenever you need to. I'm hoping we're about ready. Any other edits to text that folks have an inclination to make, right?
25.
Doesn't say 25?
No, it says 2050.
Uh-huh.
Gotcha.
Could we just make May in bold? Just as a reminder
It's not given.
that in the future, we should consider.
I would be inclined to say no in terms of that. There's a lot of places in this code that say may, and that is somewhat of a larger philosophical discussion on language, but I think in keeping with the formatting of this text as a whole, that's.
All right, does that reflect what you said right there?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other edits?
What about water for ADUs?
In terms of that, she left, but I think we answered her question in terms of.
The only reason
But
I'm
you-
bringing it up is that I just know from where we're at, we have a certain allocation
Mhm.
and they base usage, in my understanding of how they organize, on that, average usage every year. If all of a sudden my usage goes from 3,000 gallons a month to
Bless you.
5,500 gallons a month, what am I doing? It's within what I'm allowed, but is it something that they should be?
So in that kind of, all these water purveyors throughout our county have all
Right.
different practices
Right.
and rules and contracts. But in your case, you would come to us with an ADU, proposed ADU and a letter from your water company
So
saying.
why do I have to bring you a letter? And
We're just looking that you have accounted for your water supply. That you've
So-
accounted for.
In my reading, it's that the ADU shall utilize the same water service except where explicitly required by a utility provider. So if your water utility said you have to have a separate tap,
But how do I know that?
Your
you would have
water
to go to
provider
your water
will tell you.
provider.
What
So
we're
if I-
doing is,
Go ahead.
we don't know what the rules are for all
Right,
the
I
water
don't either.
jurisdictions.
I don't
Yeah.
either.
But when you come with for a site plan review, we'll ask you, did you check with your water supplier?
Okay.
On what their policy is for this ADU? Do you have something in writing that verifies that so that we can put that in our site plan review and say that's been covered and accounted for? And you may get a result that your water company wants you to get a new tap, or they may say, oh, no, we just allocate a certain amount. We don't care what you use it for.
Good.
But then that can be amended onto your site plan review document as evidence that that was taken care of, it was covered for your protection in the future too.
Okay.
Lane, did you need to take off?
Yeah.
All right, just for the record, Commissioner Bronis is gonna exit the meeting. We still have a quorum, so hopefully we can take care of what we need to take care of here in a moment.
Can I ask you a question, Eli? I've got a question about it. I don't know if I got it right on the ADU. Yeah. Did you think our language was, there's too much restriction in that? You were saying just make it limited to the ADUs smaller than the structure that's on there now? What do you see as the issue with being specific?
So I think the current 2024 land use code just requires that there's one ADU per property and it needs to be smaller than the primary residence. And so I think our request would be, there's some new proposed language that has specific square footage. I think it says 750 square foot or less. And I think our request would be just set that language aside for now. Maybe that could be a future discussion, but I think it's just, right now the state's passing statutes opening up ability for more ADUs to be built, for more housing to happen. It's been very important in our county for keeping farms from being split apart, to be able to have kids or grandparents on the property and build something for them. And so I think this is I don't know what the process was, but it seems like just a cookie cutter taken from the city to say, let's go for 750 square foot. And I think we had some good discussions back in 2024 where we said, well, as long as it's smaller than the main residence, why do we need to send somebody out and check? Is it 800 square foot or is it 650 square foot? Let people do.
Well, just to clarify, it's 1,200 square foot, not 750,
Or
or 75% of the gross floor area.
Whichever is less.
And no less than 500 square.
And that's the proposed. I think the existing just says smaller than the main residence.
Sean, did this come about because we were having issues with?
Yeah, because, well, we also require a limited use permit for a second residence. So
Thanks.
if an ADU only needs to be less square footage than the primary residence, and if you're gonna build a second residence on your property, as long as, if your primary residence is 3,000 square feet, you can have a 2,800 square foot ADU, and it's not a second residence.
Now, to clarify, that was a last minute change to the 2024 code. Up until the very last minute, second residences were allowed by right. And they said, in part, we're gonna change these to limited because you can go and do your ADUs, and we're gonna leave that alone. And so it's a little bit of backing up from the kind of final changes made by the commission.
I mean, we're also interested in supporting the proliferation of ADUs. I mean, it's a good solution for a lot of families. But yeah, there's money even available that we could provide to people as incentives to build ADUs, but we can't qualify for any of that unless we have some clarity about what an ADU is and how it distinguishes necessarily from a second residence.
So one of my concerns is we were going through this on the ADUs. 1,250 square feet is fairly small.
You got 75%.
Or 1,250, whichever.
Yeah, or
Whichever is less.
Right.
So really most everybody's gonna 1,250 feet, 1,250 feet. And it provides a ceiling on what can be done as far as an ADU. That's my concern with it. Yes, I mean, I get it, like you have a 6,000 square foot house. Now I got a 5,500 square foot ADU, like, I don't know that we need to be going there. But
I remember another one of our concerns was that a lot of times people will build another residential unit and then later try to split the land and get two residential units on two different pieces of property. That's really not the intention with an ADU. An ADU is that it's coupled with the residence and it wouldn't be able to be split off. These kind of create requirements that keep it tied to the residence and not able to be split off, like a second residence could be.
And what would be the problem with them subdividing and splitting it off?
Yeah, what would be the problem? Let's see. I'm trying to remember, sorry.
No, I'm just.
Setbacks.
Setbacks, that's right, that's a good
What's the
one.
wall?
But those have to be met by the
Deny the
ADU.
subdivision.
The subdivision
You have to go through
process
the-
would make that not possible. I'm just trying to.
We don't have to say yes if they
Yeah.
sorry, built it a little too close, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know, and again, like, why, I'm thinking of these things now and not when we were dealing with this.
I know, I'm trying to remember the conversation we had, or
I
if
know.
I was there.
But I think this, but it does, I read it now and
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh.
Let me see, I got notes here for reasons why we did things.
I definitely like the other added language about using the same water and electrical service, the, OWTS permitting, driveway access, that sort of stuff, but yeah,
The size.
I feel like we're all kind of not remembering or whatever about where these numbers came for the size or the justification on the size limits.
There's very little differentiation. There's virtually no differentiation between a second residence and an ADU as it's.
But I guess the question is that a problem?
Yeah.
So if we just went to 75%, no more than 75% of the primary residence, I feel like that's a good work back towards the middle, but.
Just eliminate the 1,200 square foot
Correct.
part.
Would that meet some of your concerns, Eli? If it was just.
It's a step. I mean, I would support that, absolutely. You know, just looking back, remember before 2024, a second residence was allowed by right. And so part of the pitch that was made was that, well, all residential was allowed by right. And so, a second residence was allowed by right. They moved it at the last minute to limited, but part of the assurance they told everyone was, don't worry, ADUs are gonna be real easy to do. So you get at least one second residence. I mean, it's ADU, but for free. And if you have a cabin or a garage or what have you, that you can use that for your kids. So I think that's a great first step. You know, I'd advocate for just setting the whole thing aside and continuing on as it is. I think it's written pretty well as is, but I think that's a great first step.
Thank you. Make it a motion time?
Any other deliberation?
I mean, I kind of like that. I like it.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, and square footage, I guess I'm trying to think of like implications, water use, number of bedrooms, so square footage isn't really an indication of, you know, it can be an indication of how many people are, what kind of use that, but it could have a really giant.
But I mean,
Living
they're
room,
still,
yeah.
so like with an ADU, they're still gonna go through site plan review.
Yeah.
So they're still gonna be asked like
Yeah.
about water. I mean,
Yeah.
you still gotta get to know them.
Yeah.
You gotta do the things right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And,
we're
you
gonna
know,
site plan
but,
review, but if the site plan, it would have site plan.
like it.
At this time, ADUs have no review. If the site plan review were to be brought back, it would at least have a site plan review.
Okay.
Sometimes people are, you know, they don't get an address for them. Sometimes they'll come in and they'll want a distinct like access for them. And then we have engineering coming to the planning department saying, hey, these people are getting another access. We only permit one access per property, except under special conditions.
I mean, that's why I think the rest of the added, you know, F through I make a lot of sense to specify. It seems like the sticking point is square footage for folks.
So I would make a motion that we modify our change in section 2.4. Well, we have B5, to read the.
See if I can bring up the full code here to look at.
Yeah.
Already know where you're at in it, especially this section. So where is it? It's down here. So yeah, we're in 2.4. Dear Lord. Just go on. I know what you're talking about. We'll get that correct.
So I seem to recall discussion of a specific instance where a property owner would buy a property with a small house. Then they're building a huge house, but they're saying that the small house would then become the ADU. And that I thought that tied into the idea of square footage, because you didn't want to have two huge houses and call one an ADU. So I think that's what prompted the 1,200 square foot argument, because that's what you see in a lot of other ADU ordinances, a size limitation. The intent being a small structure.
I think also some of the square footage falls back to technically into just straight planning language. An ADU is not an additional residence, an accessory dwelling unit to the main home. So that's where a lot of them have square footage restrictions based on just general planning.
Yeah, right.
Rules and regulation. It's just a generalization.
But who is it that decides the square footage limitation between a dwelling unit and a residence?
I would just say it's just kind of an accepted practice where people have been putting in different communities and planning departments and municipalities have been putting square footage restrictions. It's just been a commonality.
It's chapter 2, section 4, subsection B.5.
All right.
That,
Right, Todd, you have one more motion?
Yeah.
You need to be careful about what you're saying about electrical, because electrical is a state code. And you're saying they have to use the current electrical system, and that may not even be.
Unless,
Unless required by the utility.
That's why we're.
separate water taps.
And so you're taking away the resident's choice to get a separate meter, electric meter? Is that the intention there?
That's the way it's written.
Sure seems like you'd want to let people get a separate meter if they want it or need it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we leave section 2.4.b, subsection 5 as is, and do not move forward with our proposed changes. Cause that's a great point. If I want to go to DMEA and say, hey, will you guys let me put up a separate meter so I can have separate bills for taxes for whatever, and we're telling them they can't do that. Same with the water tap. Like if Tri-County will let me have a separate water tap for this building, like why not?
You might want to just change the word to complies with local utilities. Because then it's either or.
Okay. So the ADU shall comply with
Accessory dwelling unit.
Look,
It's just.
All right,
just-
there's a motion on the table. Does anyone second it? Or do you want to amend your motion? To strike all added language to return it to the 2024. Is there a second?
What's the motion again?
To remove all
Remove all
edits
the green
to the
stuff.
ADU language and return to the 2024 version.
I'll second your
I have a little discussion on that. Anyone else have anything to say? And this could potentially be done in a, whatever. However, I agree with the water and electrical. If someone wants separate tabs, separate electric connection, you know, a separate meter for billing your rental unit or whatever, that makes sense to me. I do think we should keep the point G, shall have an approved septic system. And common driveway, I guess I don't know why that is important, but someone thought it was. And then the distinct address, I think we should keep in there. That was kind of an emergency response addition to make sure people move on to appropriate addresses. So we could either vote on it as proposed or probably vote on it as proposed and then propose new language if other folks feel like those things should
I
still
think
be.
the septic is important. Sure.
Well, and you're right, and I think the septic's gonna be required, by the state, regardless of what we say. I'd be good with, amending the motion.
Okay.
But I'd like to amend my previous motion to change section 2.4B subsection 5 for the change to read, the total gross floor area of a detached accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 75% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling unit. Period. Cross out the remainder. I would also like to strike out section F. Leave the remainder as is.
Okay. We need a second on we have to second that. Yeah, sure. Anyone want to second that?
I'll second that.
All right, Cindy seconds the amendment to that motion. All in favor?
Or we can discuss it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
My only point here, I think we're getting farther away from calling it an accessory dwelling unit. It's just a second home. Once you start, you're not using the same water and electrical service. Septic is a different issue.
A home is a dwelling unit.
But I think it's supposed to be accessory to the main home.
But we do specify it can be rented.
Yeah.
It, it's.
Can have a separate access.
That's all I had to say. You go ahead and vote.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I just show Dave, how did, or
No.
all
I'm
opposed?
saying no.
Okay, motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1. Do you need us to write, do you have notes on that, or do you want me to?
So I'm cutting off the last, I suppose, clause in point A. It's just ending after 75% of gross floor area per principal
Yep.
dwelling unit,
Yep.
right? Right there, put a period,
Yep.
strike the rest, and leave
And then.
only G, point G.
No, and then just
And just strike F.
Oh, and just strike F, right? Okay. All right, let's see if I.
Okay. Any other edits? Site plan reviews. What are the other major ones? That seems like the major one. We've heard kind of both sides, people that are in favor or opposed. Anyone have any inclination to change anything about site plan review as edited in the red line version? All right, I think with that, we can move forward with a formal motion to, our motion would need to, one, find that the proposed amendments are consistent with the 2018 Delta County Master Plan and adopt the recommended language as proposed in Exhibit A, B, and C, which are the text amendments, natural medicine business amendment, and the battery energy storage system amendment. This will be a formal resolution to the Board of County Commissioners. And then from there on, they can either accept our edits and, create their formal resolution to update the land use code or send it back to us for further revision. Unless anyone else wants to, it seems like we're all kind of ready. I would move that this commission find that the proposed amendments are consistent with the 2018 Delta County Master Plan and adopt the following recommended land use code amendments. A, the text amendments in Exhibit A, B, the natural medicine business amendment in Exhibit B, and C, the natural energy storage system amendment, battery energy storage system amendment in Exhibit C. All in favor of adopting this resolution? We'll do a show of hands.
We need a second.
I need a second. Anyone second?
I'll second you.
Cindy seconds it. And all in favor, let's do a show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ayes. Any noes? The resolution passes 6-0.
Just a quick point of order. I don't know if it's important, but I don't believe you mentioned to send it forward with the recommended edits.
So the edits have been done in real time and are part of Exhibit A.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know we were able to do them real time.
Is that reflecting what we just discussed? I cut off that clause after dwelling unit, period there, and eliminated what was previously pointed out.
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
Could we still run just point order, just want to make sure the Board of Adjustments, that shortened version.
Yes, that was included in, yeah, that is the most.
I just want to make sure, I thought we did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So
I think, yes, unless there's anything else, we can be meeting adjourned.
How do we, like, when Eli had, Kate had, how do we,
Minutes.
from the minutes, we'll have that?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's important that we grab all the comments that were provided and put them in the minutes as suggestions to look at for future
Okay,
amendments.
that's where I want to make sure we're.
Yeah, I do think, again, yeah, we kind of have a running list of things we want to look at for bigger changes.
Okay. I just wanna
I've
make
got
sure.
those notes as well, and I'll make sure to kind of share them with.
And
the
I'm really
directors.
hoping that this little platform we got the code into now, you can see how we're
That is
making the
kinda nice.
amendments in there. I think we can take them on more often, you know, so that when you got issues like this, we can just take them one by one, not like a whole spectrum of them, you know,
Yeah.
that's really difficult, I feel like.
Because it's also something where it'd be nice if you guys as a planning commission could say, hey, look, we wanna change this language and we just focus on that. Maybe we do one amendment,
Right.
you know, because it creates that ability to start the language, start the process. Instead, because what we had done before, we just got this running list in the planning department. Oh, this is broken, this is broken, this is broken. And then we try to lump it all together.
Yeah, I feel
Trying
like
to
there's been
fix it.
varying opinions about that, whether we all try to lump it together or we do it step by step, because every time we have a new officially adopted land use code, then which land use code applies to which application, in what date
Right.
did you apply? But hopefully as we kind of catch up and applications come in more real time.
Just to show you though, too, to that point, Kate, down here in this platform, it will have a ordinance or a resolution history. So if this section of code were ever amended, it'll put that reference at the bottom of that section of the code. So you can go back and you can see what was previously there and at what date
What was
did it
proposed
change.
and changed?
Get on the record, all the edits.
Yes.
So for in practice, person coming to get a permit or checking the land use code, they'll always be seeing the most up-to-date recent version, right? But if we were checking for unlawful, non-conforming developments, we will have a snapshot in time of the land use code by section.
All right, thank you for all your work on this, Sean. I know this was one of the final pieces you were working on to get out of here. Congratulations. And yeah, thank you to the last couple members of the public remaining, but I guess meeting officially adjourned. Who wants this very official resolution?
Yes, he had. Yes.
So I asked him about that too, like, what if we do?
It was like, can we do some edits? If you're a Delta.
Yeah. It was all strategic. So there's, that's my.
Rich, all.
So that's-
Where the Cowboys.